What began as a light-hearted interview quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive late-night showdowns ever aired. When Stephen Colbert blindsides Elon Musk with a wild and deeply personal accusation, tensions ignite, secrets are dragged into the spotlight, and a primetime clash becomes a live-wire confrontation no one saw coming. The studio lights bathed the set in a warm, familiar glow, echoing the comfort of late-night tradition. The audience buzzed, half from the thrill of being in the room, half from anticipation. Elon Musk had walked onto the stage with a tight smile, wearing that blend of eccentric calm and quiet defiance he often reserved for moments when the world leaned in too close. Colbert, sharp as ever, leaned forward from behind his desk with a grin that held a hint of something colder beneath the charm. The opening minutes played like any other segment. Witty jabs, mutual teasing, veiled compliments. But something was off. Colbert's questions started drifting into murkier waters. There was a calculated edge behind each remark, subtle but unmistakable, like a scalpel hidden in banter. And then, without warning, the room changed. Colbert shifted in his seat, smirking as he began referencing a recently uncovered thread of controversial posts. He alleged that Musk's AI team had been quietly funding social media algorithms that suppressed LGBTQ+ content while promoting far-right influencers, a bombshell claim with no public basis, but delivered with the calm assurance of a man convinced of his own authority. Colbert went further, accusing Musk of allowing what he called algorithmic racism to run rampant on X, and hinting at internal whistleblower documents he claimed to have reviewed earlier that day. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or recoil. The camera briefly caught Musk's face, no longer amused, now unreadable. He responded calmly at first, almost too calmly, like a pot beginning to simmer. But Colbert doubled down, painting a narrative of Musk as a tech tyrant so fixated on control he'd become blind to the moral cost of his ambition. The accusations were vague, incendiary, and when Musk challenged them as baseless, Colbert pivoted, bringing up a tweet from 2 years ago, wildly taken out of context, twisting it into a supposed dog whistle. Musk's composure cracked. His voice hardened, his tone clipped. He demanded facts, sources, context, anything resembling journalistic integrity. But Colbert kept the pressure on, his delivery sharper, his audience primed. What was intended to be a conversation was fast turning into a public inquisition. The tension was thick now, the kind that steals the oxygen from a room. Elon's eyes locked onto Colbert's like a hawk sighting a threat. Then came the shift. Musk didn't play defense. He flipped the table, metaphorically, and began dismantling the host's credibility. With precision, he recounted the networks Colbert had aligned with, the corporations backing his show, and the scandals quietly buried under his own producer's watch. He highlighted Colbert's own problematic soundbites from older episodes, some edited, some real, and exposed them to the glare of present-day scrutiny. The crowd didn't know how to respond. Gasps rippled across the room. Colbert tried to regain control, cracking a joke to lighten the mood. But the timing was off. Musk wasn't smiling. He leaned forward, cold and steady, and posed a question that made Colbert pause just long enough for the silence to become deafening. Then came the twist. Musk claimed he had been approached days before the interview by a former CBS staffer warning him that Colbert was planning to corner him on air. It wasn't just an ambush, it was a setup, an orchestrated takedown engineered for ratings. And now, Elon had turned the ambush back on its host live, before millions. The audience was frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing television or war. Colbert's face tightened, his usual smirk now replaced with an uncomfortable rigidity. He tried steering the show toward a break, but Musk cut in again, unrelenting. He accused the show of masquerading entertainment as activism, of weaponizing identity politics for profit. The words hung heavy, each one a hammer to the structure of the show's carefully maintained image. And then, to the stunned silence of the studio, Musk said something under his breath, too low for the mic to catch clearly, but sharp enough that Colbert visibly recoiled. Something personal, something meant for him alone. There was no laughter now, just a taut, electrified silence. The tension hadn't just escalated, it had detonated. And the night was far from over. As the studio audience sat stunned, lights blaring and cameras rolling, the air pulsed with a single question. What line would be crossed next? The tension on set had congealed into something tangible, dense, unshakable, electric. The cameras, operated by jittery crew members trained never to break the fourth wall, kept rolling, silently capturing the unease blanketing the stage like smog. Colbert, ever the polished showman, sat motionless. His fingers curled against the cue cards in front of him, white knuckles betraying his practiced calm. Musk, stone-faced and coiled with restrained fury, sat like a man who had walked into a trap and discovered he brought the sharper teeth. Stephen shifted again in his chair, eyes flicking toward a producer just off stage. But no cue was coming. The director knew better now. They had gold. Viral gold. Colbert had pushed for this segment, had insisted on the courageous pivot to harder conversations, and now that the consequences were staring him in the face, the safety net had been cut. Musk leaned back, his eyes scanning the audience, then returning to Colbert with a cool, defiant calm. His voice when he spoke was low, deliberate, and stripped of theatrics. No more tech mogul eccentricity, just a man dismantling the mask of a system that thought it could frame him and remain untouched. He called the allegations slanderous, not misguided, not exaggerated, slanderous. He accused Colbert of leveraging identity politics as a blunt force, weapon, not in defense of progress, but for spectacle, for clout, for manufactured outrage served on a silver tray of advertiser revenue. His words landed with clinical precision, cutting not just through Colbert's argument, but through the very foundation of late-night wokeness as branding. Stephen tried to pivot, reaching for audience sympathy. He invoked marginalized voices, framed the conversation as a platform for accountability. But Musk was faster now, interrupting with facts, stats, and a rhythm that Colbert couldn't match. Elon brought up real-time user data on X showing algorithm transparency. He cited the new AI safety board, its diverse leadership, and even mentioned specific initiatives he'd funded in LGBTQ+ education and AI bias mitigation. Colbert stumbled, searching for solid ground. Then Musk dropped another bomb. He named a former ex-employee, one who, according to Elon, was paid to fabricate internal claims for a media expose that was never released. A woman who had quietly signed an NDA and disappeared from tech media cycles after rumors surfaced that she'd been compensated by a rival platform. Musk pulled no punches. He said her name. Loud, clear. Colbert's smile, now visibly forced, cracked for the first time that night. His voice faltered as he tried to steer the interview toward commercial, a reset, an escape hatch. But Musk wasn't done. He turned directly to the audience, sidestepping Colbert entirely, and delivered a monologue, sharp, passionate, and unscripted. He called out the mainstream narrative that weaponized misinterpretations and peddled outrage in place of truth. He didn't apologize. He didn't soften. He claimed he had nothing to hide and dared anyone watching to research the accusations themselves, to stop letting comedians masquerading as journalists set the national tone on issues they barely understood. The studio was silent again. No laughter. Just quiet shifting, uneasy glances, and 1,000 pairs of eyes trying to figure out if they were witnessing a takedown or a breakdown. And then Colbert made a mistake. He chuckled, a single mocking laugh, the kind meant to win back the room. He made a sly jab, suggesting that Musk's entire tirade was the result of an inflated ego, of a man so obsessed with legacy that he'd conflate criticism with conspiracy. It was meant to be clever, deflating, final. But Elon didn't laugh. Instead, he turned back toward Colbert with a stare that sliced through the tension like a scalpel. He calmly, almost too calmly, called the host a hypocrite. Not for the accusation, but for pretending to be above it all. For using virtue as theater while accepting paychecks from conglomerates accused of far worse. Then he said it. He referenced an old episode, nearly forgotten, where Colbert made a joke, a tasteless one, about a transgender athlete. It had resurfaced online before, but had been buried quickly under PR maneuvering and strategic silence. Elon brought it back to the surface, not as a petty jab, but as a scalpel. He called it what it was. A moment of weakness, hidden behind a studio laugh track. Colbert's face drained of color. It was no longer about Musk. It was about the machinery behind the host, the network, the illusion. Colbert attempted to regain the narrative, but his words were clumsy now. Defensive. He spoke of growth, of learning, of comedy evolving. But the balance had shifted. The crowd could feel it. No longer was Musk the one under the spotlight. It was Colbert blinking under the glare, the script slipping from his grip. A single cough echoed from the audience. Then Elon rose. Not with drama, not with fury, just with quiet resolve. He adjusted his jacket, looked toward the crowd, then toward the camera, and offered a final remark. One that wasn't theatrical or angry, just chillingly direct. He said this wasn't an interview. It was an ambush. And he didn't stay in places where truth was bent for applause. He turned, walked off stage, and didn't look back. The cameras didn't cut. The audience didn't clap. The silence was deafening. And Colbert sat alone behind his desk, eyes fixed on the spot where his guest had been moments before. The crew didn't know whether to cue commercial or let it ride. But somewhere off stage, producers scrambled, phones rang, and the whispers began to spread. What had just happened wasn't part of the script, and what was coming next might be even worse. The silence left in Elon Musk's wake was suffocating. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the studio was the faint hum of the air conditioning system, a barely perceptible buzz that now seemed louder than any standing ovation. Colbert remained seated, but his posture was stiff, rigid, like someone who had just realized the room they were standing in was on fire, but hadn't yet figured out where the exits were. The stage was empty except for him now, and it wasn't the triumphant solo shot the producers had envisioned. There was no clever quip, no camera-friendly smile, only a host, visibly shaken, blinking under lights that suddenly felt more like interrogation lamps than stagecraft. Behind the cameras, crew members shuffled nervously, whispering to one another, eyes darting between monitors and control panels. The producer, Jane Hendricks, a seasoned veteran with 30 years of live television under her belt, was frozen behind the glass. Her mouth moved, issuing commands into the earpiece, but the commands came too late. Elon was gone. Not backstage. Not in the green room. He had walked straight out of the studio doors into the New York night. Security tried to follow him, but he waved them off, disappearing into a waiting vehicle with tinted windows. Back on stage, Colbert finally stood. He straightened his jacket, smoothed his papers, and muttered something barely audible to the audience. A limp attempt at a joke. It landed with the impact of a stone dropped into still water. No one laughed. The usual rhythm of applause signage and pre-programmed clapping cues were discarded entirely. No red lights blinked, no one waved a card. They cut to commercial, hard. Backstage was chaos. Producers barked into headsets, legal advisors had already joined calls, and publicists for both CBS and Musk were demanding full recordings, timestamps, and copies of everything that had been said. Meanwhile, Twitter, sorry X, was already ablaze. Clips were being uploaded by the second, millions of impressions stacking like wildfire embers in a dry forest. Hashtags like Colbert vs. Musk and Walk Out Tonight were already trending globally. The full video, still hours away from official release, was being dissected frame by every major online commentator and political pundit imaginable. Colbert retreated to his dressing room immediately after the commercial break. No press, no green room selfies, no back-patting from celebrity peers. Just a slammed door and the sound of a man realizing he might have taken one swing too many. Inside, he paced. He was angry. At Musk, sure, but more so at himself. He had underestimated him. He had mistaken eccentricity for weakness and aloofness for a lack of preparation. But Musk had come armed, not just with facts, but with intent. Worse, Colbert realized too late that his own past wasn't as bulletproof as he'd believed. The clip Musk brought up, the old joke, had resurfaced before. But never like this. Not in front of a live audience. Not in the middle of an ideological confrontation that millions had now turned into a battleground. Elsewhere, Musk's team was already spinning the narrative. His press agent released a statement within the hour, declaring the walkout a protest against performative activism and weaponized misinformation. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't scrambling. He was reasserting control of the story in real time, and doing it masterfully. Within a day, the fallout was seismic. Clips of the encounter dominated YouTube, garnering millions of views in hours. Headlines ranged from Colbert crumbles in on-air ambush to Elon Musk dismantles late-night narrative live. Editorials poured in from all sides. Some lauded Musk for standing his ground, for refusing to play the media game. Others defended Colbert, accusing Musk of bullying tactics and exploiting his platform for personal gain. But even among Colbert's defenders, there was an unshakable sense that the segment had gone too far. And then came the internal leak. An anonymous whistleblower from the show's own writing team revealed that the segment had, in fact, been heavily orchestrated. The accusations Colbert hurled at Musk weren't spontaneous. They were built from curated Reddit threads, out-of-context tweets, and cherry-picked analytics pulled together under the guise of a hard-hitting interview. It was entertainment, dressed as confrontation. And now, the curtain had been pulled back. CBS launched a quiet internal review. There were hushed talks of reprimands. Contracts were reviewed. No firings were made, yet. But the message was clear. The network had gambled on a spectacle, and while they had earned the attention, they had lost something more fragile: credibility. A week later, Colbert returned to his desk, slightly more subdued. He opened the show with a somber monologue. No band, no opening theme, just him. He admitted, not fault, but miscalculation. He claimed his intent was to hold power to account, but that maybe, just maybe, in chasing a moment, he had lost sight of the conversation. It was a half apology, not to Musk, but to the audience. A moment of honesty wrapped in careful wording. Public reaction was mixed, but Musk didn't respond. No tweets, no posts, nothing. In fact, Musk had already moved on. He was seen days later at a conference in Berlin, speaking on AI ethics and future governance models. A reporter asked about the Colbert incident during a press briefing. Musk smirked, paused, then simply said, "We've got more important things to build." And that was it. The final note. In the end, Colbert's show returned to its regular programming. Ratings dipped slightly, then began to stabilize. But something had shifted. Viewers watched with different eyes now. The jokes felt a little more cautious. The interviews a little less sharp. A fog of hesitation hung in the background, subtle but unmistakable. As for Musk, the walkout became legend. Not just a media stunt, but a defining moment in the war between legacy media and emergent tech powerhouses, he had walked into hostile territory, unarmed by conventional standards, and walked out having flipped the narrative on its head. It wasn't just a clash between personalities. It was a rupture, the kind of televised rupture that revealed something larger about power, performance, and the dangerous illusion of moral high ground under studio lights. And as the world moved on, one thing became undeniably clear. No one would ever watch a late-night interview the same way again.